Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our February 24th board meeting. We're going to have a presentation. Somebody has a voice of authority here. We're going to start with a presentation. There's a gala check presentation to the Snowsuit Fund, Operation Come Home, and Beechwood Cemetery. And who is going to lead that? Someone has a check.
I don't have the check, but I know it's in the room. I saw it arrive earlier on. But I do have some commentary around it,
Okay.
Chair, whenever you're ready.
I'll turn it over to you.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Chair, and everyone, hello, and thank you for being here. We're going to be making these check presentations, and I hope we're ready to go over there. Okay. So, Chair, Board, folks in the audience, the 10th Annual Ottawa Police Gala was held on November 9th, 2019 at the Shaw Centre. It was a particularly grand day for my family and I. It was our first big event in the city, and we enjoyed it a lot. It was a huge success, recognizing and celebrating the service of our members to the community while raising funds to improve the lives of residents. For the first time, the gala was sold out, and big thanks to Jim Elves and Miss Catherine. Programs provide confidence and skills for youth to create brighter futures for themselves. As well, the gala proceeds were donated to the Beechwood Cemetery for the Ottawa Police Service Memorial as a way of honoring those who have dedicated their lives to serving and protecting our community. None of this would be possible, Chair, without the ongoing support of our sponsors. The generosity and commitment they have demonstrated supporting the gala confirms why this city is one of the best places to live. We appreciate every sponsor, donor, and everybody. The 11th Annual OPS Gala will take place on Saturday, November 7th, 2020 at the Shaw Centre. The application process will open soon for new charities to pitch their ideas that create assistance, support, or opportunities for residents in our community. We hope that everyone will be there with us to make the gala another wonderful success. And as a reminder, to date, the gala has raised $1 million. And again, I want to thank everybody who's contributed in any way to this excellent initiative. Thank you. Unless there's questions from the board or comments, I think we can make the presentation. Oh, Catherine is here. And we'd ask Catherine to say a few words. Thank you.
The councillors, Mr. Chair, as well, Your Worship, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, c'est un grand plaisir d'être ici parmi vous aujourd'hui. Je vous remercie sincèrement de l'appui de la communauté pour cet événement très spécial. In my role as co-chair of the community co-chair of the gala, it really is an opportunity for us to be able to celebrate the fact that policing is about more than protection. It's about community building. It's about strengthening relationships, often for those who are the most marginalized. And so we are really delighted to be able to have these check presentations today and to be able to continue to show the tremendous dedication of the Ottawa Police Force to this community. And just as a citizen of Ottawa, I thank each and every one of you for the service that you provide to all of us and to our families and to the organizations that you support too. Thank you, Chief.
So can we go ahead with the presentation now then? Okay, so moving on with the agenda now, the first thing is the confirmation of the agenda that the Ottawa Police Services Board confirmed the agenda of the 24th of February 2020 meeting. Confirmed? Thank you. Confirmation of minutes. Minutes number 17 of the 27th of January 2020, that the Ottawa Police Services Board confirmed minutes number 17 of the 27th of January 2020 meeting. Confirmed? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? None? There are committee reports now from the committee chairs and minutes. The first one is the Human Resources Committee, draft minutes number 6 of the 5th of February 2020, and which I chair. The Human Resources Committee met on the 5th of February. We discussed a new draft framework for conducting the performance evaluations of the executive command members. One of the main responsibilities of the board is the evaluation of the Chief of Police. We are looking to revise our framework in order to, 1, include more tangible inclusion action plan. The action plan was tabled at our January 27th meeting and is before the board tonight for approval. And there's also policy and governance, and I guess we can receive both of these at a time. Member Valiquet.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, for the board, which is on this evening's agenda for approval. We also talked about the development of a crisis communications plan, which is part of the board's 2020 work plan. This communications plan will be developed jointly with the service, with the naming of police facilities. In the coming month, the committee will be looking to recommend to the board a commemorative naming of a space within the new South Division building, and this we will do in cooperation with the service. The commemoration will be intended to honor Flora Campbell, the first policewoman ever hired by the Ottawa Police Service, as well as the overall contribution of women in policing. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Valiquet. Does the board receive these two items? There's a question.
Thank you, Chair. While I reiterate full faith and confidence in your leadership and Executive Director and fellow board members, it is my considered suggestion that the entire document about the internal communication is indeed a great initiative and well documented. Thank you. However, it is my view and suggestion that there be minor variance at point number 6 of the document. I strongly believe that the board should consult experts in the corporate governance matters for the police boards and shall draw parameters about the issues, especially the critical and non-routine communications, and then such matters upon the advice and the consent of the board be embedded in this policy document.
Were you wanting this as an inquiry? We were just receiving the two reports that were put.
So my suggestion is that this point 6, which gives this authority, we should be making this variance in consulting and outlining the parameters of the communications for the purpose of communicating to the.
But that's item number 3 on the agenda. We're just on
Yes.
we're just on
Yes.
receiving the reports now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Can we receive the reports?
Yes, we received it.
Thank
Yes.
you. Okay, then the next item on the agenda are inquiries, and I have 2 inquiries. The first, and I'll read the inquiries. The first one is with respect to an article that was recently brought to my attention that appeared in Ottawa Life magazine. It was with respect to a public complaint lodged by Mr. Rodney Mockler with the OIPRD concerning the conduct of an Ottawa police officer. The article alleges that the subsequent investigation by the Ottawa Police Service into the matter in question was found to be not reasonable and contained a number of deficiencies. The article states that the OPS was asked by the OIPRD to conduct another review of the matter, and as a result of which was then found to be reasonable. As a board member who represents community interests, I was concerned when I read that an investigation by the OPS into a public complaint was characterized as not reasonable, containing deficiencies and requiring another review. So, not reasonable and deficient. And why was the board not advised of this finding? And what was subsequently completed in the second review, and what were the lessons learned? That's my first inquiry. Yes. And my second inquiry was with respect to recently a story appeared in the Ottawa Citizen pertaining to a judge's ruling whereby an Ontario's Superior Court judge said that the Ottawa Police Tactical Unit's use of dynamic entry while executing a search warrant at a home in November of 2016 was described as serious misconduct and a casual disregard of search warrant laws. For those who are not aware, dynamic entry is a practice that has masked officers breaking down the door and tossing in a flash grenade with guns drawn. I would like to know, first, is dynamic entry a common practice in executing search warrants by the OPS? Secondly, what is the decision-making process to determine whether dynamic entry is required? And thirdly, will there be a change in the process going forward based on the judge's comments? So those are my inquiries. Are there any other inquiries? I have one. Member Nerman.
Thank you. The Ottawa Citizen report of February 13th, which laid that about the OPS piloted controversial facial recognition software. There have been similar reports from few other major cities in the province. One of the renowned professors on such matters from University of Ottawa has stated that there are significant concerns about the users of this software. So can the chief assure the board that due diligence would be undertaken prior to full implementation of this program to ensure public confidence and observance of the privacy law to its fullest extent?
Thank you, Member Nerman. Are there any other inquiries? No. Okay. The first item on the agenda is the Chief's verbal report, which we shall hold. The second item is outreach and recruitment update, which is a presentation, so we'll hold that. The third item is the internal board communications protocol. And Member Nerman, did you have a question on that? Yeah. So we'll hold, do you want us to hold it for you? Yeah. Okay. We'll hold this one. The fourth one is the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Action Plan 2020-2022, Chief's report, that the Ottawa Police Services Board approved that the Ottawa Police Service Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Action Plan 2020 to 2022 as amended, that was originally tabled and presented at the board meeting on 27th of January 2020. Is this approved? Thank you. Number 5, appointments made under the Interprovincial Policing Act 2019 annual report. That the Ottawa Police Board received this report. Received, thank you. Workforce Management Report. The Ottawa Police Board approved the appointment of sworn officers identified in this document. Member Valakay, did you have a question? Did you want this held? You're fine, okay. Is this approved and received? Thank you. Okay, number 7 is the Positive Workplace 2019 Annual Report. That the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Received? You have a question. Would you like this held? Okay. Number 8, Quality Assurance 2019 Annual Report, Compliance with Ministry Standards. That the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is this received? Thank you. Number 9, the Performance Report, 4th quarter. The Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Received? Thank you. Number 10, Modernization Roadmap Program Update. That the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is this received? Just for your, for those of you who know, this will be the final report on this subject. This finalizes this update to the board. Number 11, the report on the SIU investigation, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is it received? Thank you. Number 12, Legal Services Report, 4th quarter 2019, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is received? Received. Number 13, Outstanding Board Inquiries and Motions, February 20, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Received? Thank you. Letters of commendation, Chief's report, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Received? Thank you. So going back to item number 1, which is the Chief's verbal report. Chief, can I turn it over to you?
Thank you, Chair, Board. Bonsoir à tous. Good afternoon, everyone. Since the new year, we've made a series of announcements that will set the path for the Ottawa Police Service over the next 5 years. I want to thank the board for your support on these initiatives, good counsel, and good tough questions as well. I also want to thank the Community Equity Council, representing a unique and diverse view of folks in Ottawa, who again have challenged us to make sure that we are bringing the best that we possibly can around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Last but not least, I want to thank the Ottawa Police Association as well as the Senior Officer Association. Again, asking tough questions and ensuring that their members and their constituent priorities are incorporated meaningfully into our deliberations and decisions. We have made significant steps to increase frontline staffing, boost overall organizational morale, double our investment in neighborhood policing, and yes, advance equity, diversity, and inclusion within the Ottawa Police Service. These changes will impact and improve almost everything we do as an organization, both internally and externally. These decisions are important to building up the Ottawa Police Service's effectiveness and our members' individual resiliency, while also improving organizational transparency and accountability to the board and beyond. It's important that these changes are something that we do together. As part of the mandate handed down to me by the members of the board, as we move into the full implementation of these initiatives, we will need the full effort from all of you, the board, the command team, the executive team, the senior leadership team, and all members of this organization, and quite frankly, as many members as possible within the City of Ottawa itself, because everyone has skin in this game. After my first 100 days on the job as chief, I recorded a video for all the members that I wanted to share with the board as well as to those who are present in the audience. The video outlines in greater detail the work that we've done together so far to move this service forward and to address the needs of our community. I'm going to ask Annette Cohn to play the video. Hi folks, just about 100 days ago at 6:45 a.m. in the morning, I had the honor of receiving my Chief of Police badge from Constable Corey McNeil. I have to tell you, it's one of the best moments in my entire life, certainly one of my best moments in policing. A lot's happened since that moment. We've done a lot together, and there's a lot more to come. So, we've done a lot in the first 100 days. We've done a lot, not me. This is a we exercise. You're the ones that honestly came in and told me straight to my face what was going on, what we needed to do to make it better, and your own personal commitment to work with me to make this happen. All the listening, all the learning, all the planning and discussing, we've now hit a point where we're making major decisions, major announcements, and we're about to pivot from that first 100 days of listening, learning, and deciding into action, implementation, and driving this organization forward. One of the first things that we needed to look at coming into the new year was a doubling of our commitment to neighborhood policing. You know, I know, neighborhood policing makes a difference. But now we're doubling down, and in fact, we've doubled the number of neighborhood resource teams that will be deployed out there in 6 neighborhoods before the end of the year. Those are frontline officers who are going to be doing the heavy lifting of getting to know the community, earning their respect, addressing problems at the root level, still targeting the high offenders who are victimizing those communities. It's going to be a new way of doing policing built on the oldest tradition in policing. And I'm confident that the Ottawa Police Service is going to be the leader in neighborhood policing in this country and around the world. We had a tough start to the year. 6 shootings, including 1 homicide, a multiple shooting on Gilmore Street. When something goes bang in this city, we need to have a much more coordinated and significant response to that level of victimization. We're going to be working more collaboratively across the board within this organization. We're going to work in a more coordinated way with our city partners and local not-for-profit partners and community stakeholders. We're going to return those communities to a sense of normalcy and build up their own resiliency to get back to life and normal and to come forward as witnesses to help us to solve these crimes and get successful prosecutions in court. We've seen a rise in hate-related crimes and violent extremism, not just here in this country, but around the world. Ottawa Police Service has the rightful reputation of being the first police agency in Canada to implement a hate crimes unit back in 1993. We're going to make a reinvestment in the hate crimes section here. We're adding 2 new detectives in there. We're going to be even more coordinated with our city partners and our community partners. We're going to produce more meaningful data to advance our investigations and to help the community to understand what we're doing, why we're doing, and ultimately how well we're doing. I'm grateful for the hard work of people like Detective Togrel, who's been in that area for years, leading the charge on behalf of this organization. And we're going to be providing more resources and more community partners to get to a better result here in this city. One of the first times I met with frontline officers, a group of 25 officers from varying degrees from across the service sat down and gave me my first real straight talk as chief of police. And believe me, they held nothing back. In fact, the very first officer who came in front of me was from our sexual assault and child abuse section. And that officer looked at me straight in the face and said, we need help in the SACA unit. We need help across this organization. We need resources, we need staffing, we need you to listen, we need you to hear, we need you to respond, we need you to act on what we're telling you. And I will tell you, that presentation hit me hard. This officer represented the feelings that I was hearing from across this organization. We need more resources to do our job to a better degree. I'm proud of the work being done by the SACA members, the previous members in that unit and the current members. It should be a unit that protects victims, that promotes the quality of this organization, and that puts some of the most dangerous predators behind bars. We've talked a lot about the advancements we've done in our operations, but I will tell you one of the most important things that we have done to date in my tenure as chief is to look after the members themselves. I remember the tragic circumstances of the death of Officer Thomas Roberts. It happened before I took office and before I was sworn in as their chief of police, but it hit me like a hammer, as I'm sure it did for you. That was a signal to me that coming into this organization, we had to fix our own house. We had to increase the health of our family. We had to build the resilience of our frontline officers and frontline civilian members. We had to better understand the trials and tribulations that you're facing, not just your physical health, but your emotional health and your psychological health. Underneath the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Plan is an attempt to build resilience, improve wellness, improve your safety, your physical safety, free from a workplace of bullying and intimidation, your psychological safety, that you can bring your entire self to work and be confident no matter what your lived experience, what your background, what your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, what your religion, that you can come to the Ottawa Police Service and bring your full self and invest in yourself. Allow yourself to reach your full potential, and by doing that, allow this organization to reach its full potential. The Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Plan, the EDI plan, at its heart is for everybody in this organization, not just for women, not just for racialized minorities. It's for everybody. Everyone has skin in this game, and we all have to work together to make this a better, safer, healthier place. We now have an action plan that will allow us to do that. I'm very proud of the team that put it together, and I'm very proud for all of you that made a contribution to helping us to understand what we needed to do better together. Through your contributions, through your urging, through your feedback, through the work of the command team, the senior leadership team, and members across this organization, we've come up with a plan to accelerate our hiring in 2020. Instead of waiting over the course of 4 years to accumulate 100 extra hires to grow our organization, we're going to do it all in 1 year. In 2020, we're going to hire 100 new growth officer positions into the Ottawa Police Service, the largest year of hiring in our history. I know it's going to put a lot of stress on the organization, but I know this is what the organization wants and needs, and we're going to do this together. We're going to hire a top quality group of new officers, very diverse, very capable of advancing our public safety agenda. They're going to take the stress off your backs. It's going to raise morale. It's going to give more opportunities for transfers around the organization. It's going to create a level of excitement and energy in this organization that is long overdue and well-deserved. I want to thank all of you for hanging in there, for working hard, for going the extra mile, for doing everything you could to keep this organization on track until we could get a little bit of relief come in. It's not going to solve all of our problems, and we're going to have to make sure we prove a return on this investment. But this is the single biggest hiring in Ottawa Police history, and I'm proud of the team that led the charge to get this done. I want to single out Chief Administration Officer Jeff Letourneau and the HR team and finance team that allowed us to dot the I's and cross the T's to convince the mayor and the board to make this investment. Now get out there and recruit for us the best, most talented, most diverse workforce we can possibly have. Let's get them hired in, on the ground, and out there working in the front lines. The plans are our plans. The implementation of them will be up to us, and the ultimate success will be shared across the entire organization. These are very exciting times, folks. I am absolutely proud and excited to be a member of the Ottawa Police Service. I'm proud and humbled to be your chief. We're going in the right direction. It's only going to get better. Thank you for everything you've done for me and my family. Thank you for everything you've done for this service, and thank you for everything you've done for this city. God bless you. Oh, I just wanted to change it up because you're always listening to me live and you saw it on TV there. So the first 100 days were exciting. The next 100 days are going to be even more exciting. I suggest even more challenging. And again, I'm grateful for the support and guidance of the board and my command team and the leadership around here. Much more to be done. While we're doing all this, our frontline officers and members are doing their very best to protect and serve this community. Our neighborhood response teams continue to demonstrate that investing in community policing is yielding results. Just last week, our South End team seized a handgun during a traffic stop. It was the 20th crime gun that our service has seized and removed off the streets this year to date. Neighborhood resource team Constable Patty McGill has made it her mission to make meaningful changes for those that she serves and protects. She has started to work with residents living out of the Carling Avenue Motel, introducing them to support services that will help them. Constable McGill learned about a summer intern program with the city and thought that one of the teenagers at the hotel might be an ideal candidate. She worked with a young lady to create a resume. This led to the idea for Constable McGill to create a workshop for all the residents of the motel to firm up and revamp their resumes so they could apply for jobs and successfully secure those jobs. She also contacted Dress for Success, a local charity that provides professional clothing for anyone in need, as well as working with residents of the motel to identify barriers that they were experiencing in trying to gain meaningful employment. While she hasn't yet heard back on whether the young lady that she was mentoring secured the job, it's thoughtful and, more importantly, compassionate approaches like this by Officer McGill that make lasting differences in people's lives. We received a letter from a mental health worker who was assisted by our officers on a difficult call for a client. The letter states, both Constables Stephanie Daquet and Jeremy Brazeau were extremely empathetic and compassionate towards my client. They made efforts to engage her and managed to have her agree to willingly go to hospital. No easy feat with this woman. Finally, a mom wrote to us to thank us for the care that we gave her daughter during a mental health crisis. I quote, I want to thank and commend the officers who helped my daughter during a mental illness crisis. They kept her safe and were very empathetic, respectful, and professional. Finally, Board, I failed to mention earlier in the check presentations in regards to the check we gave to Operation Come Home. Acting Inspector Dana Reynolds, who's in the front row there in the gray suit, she's the actual executive director of Operation Come Home. Again, this is work that she does entirely on her own time to promote and support this charity, and I'm grateful for officers like her all across this organization. These are only a few of the dozens of letters we receive every month, and these are only a few of the examples that happen every single day, and it's the reason why I'm so proud to be the Chief of the Ottawa Police Service. And with that, I'll turn things back over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chief. I just wondered, Member Nerman's question earlier, I had heard a response from the police service about the use of facial recognition software, and I know that in various committee meetings, we had been briefed on that. So I'm just wondering, did you want an opportunity to answer his inquiry now?
I think I prefer to answer it later on, except to say that we are not using any facial recognition technology at this point.
Okay, good. That's great. Are there any questions of the Chief for his verbal report? Yes, Member Meehan.
Thank you, Chief. What we were using it, we did experiment with it.
There was a limited pilot that took place. The data was very limited in terms. It was nothing external to the organization. After doing an assessment to see if there was any efficacy, it was terminated at that point, and it has not been revisited. It won't be until we bring it to the board and there is a full exploration of the ethical and legal and practical implications of it.
Who was informed before we decided to go on to that experiment, though?
The board was informed.
Yeah.
Again, I'd be happy to provide a more detailed response.
Last year? Was last year?
I'll turn things over to the project sponsor, but yes.
So yes, we did, as part of the modernization roadmap, we updated the board prior to the commencement of it, during the process of it, and then reported on last year's update in terms of the return on investment that we anticipated from any future investment in it. So we reported to the board several points on it.
Yeah, and I can confirm that that was something we were aware it was internal. Let's before your time, but we were aware it was only being used internally. It wasn't being used with the public, and we were very insistent that before any external use of it, it would come back to the board for privacy policies. Are there other questions? Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to the chief on many of these initiatives that he's putting forward. I appreciate very much the reintroduction of the hate crime unit. We've already seen examples in our city. There was some pretty terrible ones, and I appreciate the fact that that was taken seriously. So thank you for that. I have a question for you in terms of on the gender side. I'm the liaison on women and gender equity, and I'd like to find out what is being done with these 100 officers, what efforts are being made to recruit more women and attracting more women to policing. It's more than that. It's not just the recruiting. It's also reaching out to them at an earlier stage to get them interested in the profession and making it so that they would like to be in that profession, and getting rid of issues within the force that would make them feel uncomfortable, and to ensure that when someone is recruited, that they feel very positive about it. So I'll start there. Thank you.
Chief?
Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh, if you're able to stay for another 20 minutes or so, there will be a full presentation by Acting Superintendent Patterson on all of our recruiting efforts, and he will very specifically talk about what we're doing with recruiting going forwards. I will tell you, one of the things that excited about me once I was announced as chief, but prior to my swearing in, was one of the most innovative initiatives to outreach to women, explain to them what the profession was about, and to mentor them at a very early stage. Some of our senior female leaders in the room here today, maybe you can put your hands up, who were part of that effort. There you go. So there's been a number of initiatives that we've already undertaken and will continue to undertake to make the Ottawa Police Service a destination of choice for everyone, but in particular for female applicants who'd like to have a career in policing. But if you're able to hang tight for another 20 minutes or so, Mark Patterson will provide a much more detailed overview of what we're doing going forward.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the efforts on the neighborhood policing efforts. We'll certainly look forward to seeing that impact in Bay Ward. As you know, it's been a bumpy past year, and we look forward to seeing more efforts there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Actually, that is the next item that we held, was the outreach and recruitment, but I've been reminded that before I do that, we have to, the Ottawa Police Services Board received the Chief's verbal report for that received. Thank you. Next item, outreach and recruitment update that the Ottawa Police, so are we going to hear this report, Chief?
Thank you. I'm going to ask Acting Superintendent Patterson to kick off the presentation. I know he's also going to be very proudly introducing you to some of the folks on the front lines who are doing the heavy lifting to help us to accomplish what I hope will be not only an unprecedented quantity, but quality and diversity of members coming into the organization.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I can get the panel members to come up first, and while they're coming up, I'll introduce the rest of the recruiting team. So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to introduce the panel members last, but as the Chief spoke about, accelerated hiring was one of his priorities, and I've got the majority of the recruiting team here, and I'd like to introduce them. They're sitting up in the public seating there, so hopefully I don't miss anybody. Constable Isabel Sear Pitcock, she can stand. She's a temp assignment to our recruiting team. Constable Hack Tang. Hack is one of our gurus when it comes to technology. He's behind all the social media stuff that Maria Keene is certainly keen on, no pun intended, on putting out. And Constable Hack Tang is part of our outreach recruitment team. Constable Andrew McInerney. Constable Heather Sen. Is Heather here? No. Constable Genevieve Houpe, one of our new additions to the recruitment team. Constable Fern John Simon. Constable Stéphane Fournier. Constable Alexi Campoli. Constable Denis Oliviera, a temp assignment with us. Constable Sue Wright. and Mrs. Melva Henry. Melva, you stand. So Melva would like to stand for a bit because Melva's the glue. She's the civilian coordinator and probably the longest standing member. I've actually to be part of the panel up front, but she was too shy. So I wanted to make her stand a little bit longer so that everybody gets a good look at Melva. So thank you, Melva. You can sit now. Thank you. And for our panel, I'll introduce them. Did I miss anybody? Hack? No? Got everybody? Perfect. I'll introduce the panel. Inspector Heather Lachine, she's going to be speaking about the coach officer program with our PDC. Acting Inspector John Mbakulu from the recruitment team. Acting Staff Sergeant Jeff LeBlanc. And Sergeant Maria Keene, as we all know, is the face of social media there. Without further ado, I will turn the presentation over to them. Oh, sorry. Oh. Okay, and the reason why I missed Sergeant Smith is because Sergeant Smith is actually starting with us next week. I apologize, Steve, I didn't see at the end without the uniform. So Sergeant Steve Smith he's coming from our PSS section, and he will be starting with us next week. I apologize for that, Stephen. Without further ado, I'll turn over to John and Heather.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board, and members of the OPS executive. We're going to begin our presentation providing an overview of the recruitment initiative and efforts that we've made over the last couple of years, and further discuss changes that we have also incorporated with the coach officer program. And as we're looking into this exciting year where we're building and hiring more than we have ever in the history of OPS. And as you are well aware, on January 27th, the Police Services Board approved the revised sworn hiring plan for 2020, which will result in the greatest ever hire of sworn members in our history. This has required a lot of effort, coordinated effort across the organization in order to make this a reality. With this, and based on our previous recruitment efforts, we seek to change the face of our service, and as we move forward to recruiting the best, most talented and diverse group of officers to serve and protect this city. Changes to our hiring process are not new this year. They began a couple of years ago, particularly with the creation in 2019, July of that year, of the outreach and recruitment team headed by Sergeant Keene. Since that time, we have worked to streamline the application process and reduce barriers for all applicants to the Ottawa Police Service, as well as introduce new training and changes for our background investigators, and increased our training capacity for coach officers, which Inspector Lachine will discuss in a few minutes. In July 2018, we saw the creation of the outreach recruitment team headed by Sergeant Keene. Through this process, through this team, we sought to have a mentorship program for potential recruits and applicants to our service, and to have a unit dedicated not only to helping applicants currently, but those that consider policing as a viable career choice in the future. We're seeking single-handedly to reach out to all members of our community and encourage them to make Ottawa Police as their employer of choice. This team has further helped to identify barriers and has assisted in our successes of increasing the rates of diverse candidates. Through this team, we actively incorporate an EDI lens on our hiring, as well as all of our practices within HR. As of January of 2019, we've introduced, 2020, we have introduced a streamlined application process. This process has allowed us to become more competitive as a service, as well as be able to process applicants in a faster period of time. This process is comprised of 9 separate steps, and I'll describe them shortly. The first step is a meet and greet, which can happen in person, online, over the phone. It's a non-mandatory step just for applicants to get to know the HR section, and for us to be able to discuss with them any and all questions or concerns they may have. As of January of this year, we have introduced an online application requirement, which sees the applicants filling out an online document and submit it to us. This is free of cost, and it has replaced the previous testing and application process that we had, which came at a cost to applicants. Through this, applicants that are deemed to be competitive are invited to a pre-background questionnaire where they get to fill out a personal history information form. From there, successful applicants are the ones at every single step that are reviewed to be competitive. As they move forward, they're invited to a blended interview. This is comprised of essential competencies interview, local focus interview, and value-based interview. The competitive applicants from this process are moved to a fitness assessment. This fitness test mirrors the one that they will have to pass at Ontario Police College and has been deemed as a bona fide occupational requirement. From there, applicants undertake a psychological assessment comprised of a personality assessment, as well as a meeting with a psychologist. From there, the applicants move to an employment screening comprised of a background investigation, as well as checks with several of our law enforcement partner agencies, both provincially as well as nationally. At the end of this step, the applicants that are deemed to be the most competitive are then provided a selection, a letter of offer, pending the completion of the final step being the medical assessment. As previously mentioned, we have undertaken this new process in order to streamline our applicants. Our old process could take up to 2 years for applicants to go through. This was not acceptable. Through our new process, applicants can now move between 2 to 4 months through the process, and more importantly for them, we have removed barriers for them to apply to our service. Chiefly, applicants no longer have to pay or travel to take tests, as well as applicants can now submit an application and begin the process right away without having to wait a predetermined amount of time for such test or application stages. We have also focused, as mentioned, on creating a better interview in order to streamline our application process. And we now also run several of these processes, such as the psychological assessment and the screening in the background investigations concurrently. This enables us to process applicants at a much faster pace, keeping us on a competitive pace with other police services, as well as the large employers here in our region.
So I'll just speak to this. We've seen this timeline previously. This was changed recently at the end of last year with respect to the timeline for the recruits that come through the Professional Development Center. So when the recruits start, they get their hire date, they come to PDC, and they do their training for 4 weeks. Now, I am going to note with the increase, with the accelerated plan, this is going to increase the time. It's going to become 5 weeks at the Professional Development Center because of the requirement to get that number of candidates through. They will go to OPC and do their training for 13 weeks. They'll come back to PDC, and rather than 10 weeks, it's actually going to be 12 weeks. And again, this is going to be for this 1 year. It's going to be for the 1 year with the accelerated plan, and then we will go back when and if we go back to smaller classes. They will then have their swear-in date, and that is just prior to them going out with their coach officer, and that is the start of their probation period. They then go with their training officer, and I'll go into it a little bit in more detail with respect to the tracking of the performance of the recruits later on in the presentation. So what we have is every 2 weeks they have a progress report, and that leads up to their 250-hour review. and that's the midpoint assessment. So what has changed for the recruits now, which started with 2 classes ago, is rather than breaking up their training with their coach officers and sending them back to PDC, they remain with their coach officers for their full 500 hours, and that's why it's the 10 weeks, well, the 12 weeks with the accelerated plan prior to the coach officer training. At 500 hours, they get their final assessment, and they are released then to independent patrol. And they have the 12-month post-swear-in date, which is the end of their probation period. So I will speak to that a little bit more in detail as we move forward.
I'm just going to jump in with some color commentary. Great presentation so far. Probably the #1 question that gets asked externally and internally, are we dropping the standards? And I tell you, I probably wouldn't be the chief of police if the standards were this high. The standards have never been higher. The processes have never been more customer friendly. The rigor of the review to bring a member before the command for approval to hire, it's higher than it was in my previous organization, my experience 5 years ago anyway. And as you've just seen Inspector Lachine walk through, the amount of time that we give our recruits training before and after they come back has increased to make sure that not only are they trained to the minimal standard, they're trained to the maximum standard and customized for this city. And then the rigorous coach officer process and review to make sure that before they complete their probation, we've kicked the tires pretty darn hard on these folks. It is a huge myth and a disservice to the members who've been hired by this organization and to the recruiting team now and before to say that we've dropped the standards. What we've done is exponentially increased the ability to bring quality, quantity, and diversity into this organization, and I stand by that.
And on the heels of the chief mentioning that, I'm just going to give you some brief numbers about our recruitment efforts. By adopting this new process, we've been able to attract a far greater number of applicants. Since January of this year, when we've adopted our new process, we have received over 700 applicants, and of those, 50% come from racialized and female candidates. Why that's important and why that's remarkable is that in the past, or the previous 3 years, we've only averaged approximately 650 applications per year, with roughly 25% racialized and female applicants combined. We are now at the forefront in the province in terms of the applicants, as well as the quality of applicants that we're seeing. Through some of my anecdotal interviews of applicants and seeing who's coming in, we're seeing applicants that would have otherwise been attracted by the largest employer here in Ottawa, the Federal Public Service, consider us as an employer of choice because of the process that we've incorporated, as well as we're now on scale, if not better, in terms of our competitive ability with any other service, including the Ontario Provincial Police or the RCMP. Of our last year's hiring, of the 66 recruits that we had, 39 were male and 27 females, representing 59% and 41% respectively. Of the female recruits hired, we led the province, and I believe also nationally, in terms of the women that we were able to recruit to our service. And I've been made aware to just also discuss some changes that we had for our background investigators. To begin with, all of our background investigators that we hire are former police officers, both from Ottawa as well as from other police services. They are all provided the same training required of all civilian members of the Ottawa Police Service. This includes, among others, training such as towards authentic inclusion, as well as respectful workplace. The background investigators that are selected provide us with their reports. These reports are standardized based on a form provided and on a template provided by HR, which focuses on fact-finding corroborated by witnesses and evidence. These reports are not the subjective views of the backgrounders on a particular applicant, and they do not provide a pass or fail recommendation for that applicant. Those decisions are made following careful consideration by the members of the HR section. The process is as follows. Once the background investigator has provided a report, the file is reviewed by the file manager as well as the second reader, which are the officers that have been introduced earlier. From there, the background investigators are invited along with all members of the team to discuss the applicants, and the sergeants, staff sergeant, and inspector further read all background investigation reports. At the conclusion of this activity, the most qualified, the most competitive applicants are then selected and presented to the executive command for their final approval and in order for the applicants to be hired. The background investigators that we have are also tracked same as any other civilian member within the Ottawa Police Service, and they currently fall under the direct supervision of the two sergeants. They are followed through our talent management system, which is mandatory for all members of OPS.
Okay, so I'm going to speak to the coach officers and the coach officer program and the improvements that have been made in the coach officer program recently. So currently we have 93 trained coach officers. This includes 15 racialized and 12 female coach officers. Just to note on that, I just want to note that there are 3 courses planned currently for 2020, and we're working with the front line. PDC is working with Superintendent Ford to ensure that all of the courses are full, which would equal 72 more coaches moving forward to assist with the accelerated hiring plan. Coach officer selection is currently still being completed by the chain of command, who identifies informal leaders in the organization. So the chain of command on each platoon keeps an eye on what the officers are doing. They know their teams, they identify the informal leaders on their teams, the members who are doing a good job on platoon. And also one important thing I want to note is we want, the chain of command looks for members who want to become coach officers. It's really important that the coach officers identified, they want to do the job, so they're eager to take on the recruits and lead them through the organization. Also, it states there the member self-identifies. So if a member is interested, they'll come to their chain of command and identify that they would like to become a coach officer. There's a commitment to revising the coach and recruit matching process in 2020. This is still being reviewed. Essentially, the way the process works, when we speak about matching a coach officer with their recruit, when the recruits are at OPC, midway through, the professional development team attends the Ontario Police College to meet with the recruits to see how they're doing. It's a wellness check. It's to speak to them about their marks, how they're feeling, how their family is doing. At this time, we ask the recruits if they have any wishes to report to any specific station when they come back to Ottawa. Could depend on where they live, different circumstances. So this is brought back, and then the Professional Development Center works with the staffing officers to identify where we have coach officers and to match the coach officers with the recruits that are coming on. The recruits, at the time when they come through PDC initially, the first 4 or 5 weeks, are advised of the supports that are available to them. And also when we do the midway check at OPC, and again when they return for the 10 weeks of training with the Professional Development Center. Included in that is speaking to them about whether they have whether they could have potential issues with their coach officers, because it could often be difficult for them to identify as new recruits on the road if they are having any particular issues. At the time, they're advised to, if they don't feel as though they can approach their coach officer, for example, they're advised to go through their chain of command. When recruits come through for their initial probationary period, they are still, I don't like to say owned, but PDC oversees the entire recruitment, so they're advised as well that they can come back to PDC at any time. And I also know that they develop very strong relationships with the outreach recruitment team, and they often can reach out to them as well. So they are well informed of all supports that are available to them throughout the entire process. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to touch on coach officer training now. The current OPS coach officer course is a 4-day course, and it includes these subjects that are listed: leadership and ethical decision-making, situational leadership model for coaching. The Toward Authentic Inclusion is an update for 2020. This looks at leadership and an ethical decision-making, human rights, bias awareness, GBA+, and OPS policies and procedures. The DISC evaluation training that we do with the coach officers is new, and what it does is it's a behavior assessment tool, and it's designed to help build better relationships in the workplace. So what it does is, DISC stands for Dominance, Influence, Steadiness, and Conscientiousness Evaluation. So it just looks at the different behaviors you could have in yourself and that others have as well to help everyone work better together. Further to that, I also stated already the OPS policies and procedures. We added this into the coach officer training to ensure that, that everyone is up to date on that. We've also started a coach officer advisory committee. This is made up of senior and experienced coach officers with the intention of meeting together, ongoing meetings, identifying gaps, and making positive improvements continuously for the coach officer program. I also want to note that there was a coach officer audit completed, and we're currently waiting for recommendations from the PPNA audit. Next slide. Okay, so I touched a little bit on the recruit performance management in the previous slide. Like I stated, there are performance reports that are completed every 2 weeks. Once recruits start with their coach, they continue to work on their progress, first leading up to their 250-hour assessment and then their 500-hour assessment. During this entire time, there is ongoing communication between our talent development team, the front line, and with the professional development team to ensure that the recruits are getting everything that they need with respect to their performance. What is important to note is with the performance reports that come every 2 weeks, if there is an issue with the recruit, it is identified very early on so that the Professional Development Center can work closely with the coach officer, with the recruit, to ensure that they get improvement on whatever they could be having issues with respect to their performance. And as I stated, the midway evaluation and the final evaluation. I just want to note that in speaking about the ongoing communication, it is the responsibility of the chain of command to monitor the coach officer and the training of the recruit. This is ongoing. We always talk about the chain of command knowing their team, and this is a must on the road, and this does happen with the teams. The NCOs work closely with the coach officers to know exactly the training, and the performance reports every 2 weeks assists heavily with that. Okay, so the conclusion.
We now are arriving quickly at the end of our presentation. And with this, we hope to have seen that the new process that we've put in place is equitable, effective, and will maintain the very highest standards for hiring as well as for training. All candidates that come before us are evaluated based on an EDI lens, and through our process, through our combined efforts organization-wide over the last year, and to those sustained efforts, we have addressed concerns with the fees and other barriers for applicants coming to our service, as well as we have addressed concerns that have previously existed or may exist with the background check that would-be recruits go through. As Inspector Lachine has mentioned, we have also worked hard to ensure that we have, and we will have, a multitude of well-qualified coach officers to properly prepare and onboard our new recruits as they begin their exciting career with OPS. And with that, I'd like to thank you, as well as Inspector Lachine, for your time. And I believe we have a video that follows the latest hires that we have made for this upcoming April class.
Before you play that, maybe, Maria, can you kind of set the tone for this? Maria Keene, Sergeant Keene.
It's no secret about the job proposals that we've been doing. It's gone viral, international. For this particular two gentlemen, they're best friends. They went through the process together. They did the testing together. They went through our recruiting process together. And we planned it on Friday to meet with their mentor, Brad Peak. And he set it so that to tell them he was going away for 2 weeks, that he wanted to talk to them about what was coming up in the next couple of weeks. He did, and the rest you'll see. So.
Offer you guys a job with the Ottawa Police.
You're kidding.
Yes, no, we're not kidding. Oh my God,
Amazing now.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Long time no see.
Yeah, long time no see.
Boys, you're gonna be hired right when you drop to LPS. You're saying you're
Very good. Oh, exciting. It's a long journey.
So he's.
Mr. Chair, before I know the chief wants to comment, thank you very much, Inspector Ambakula, as well as Inspector Lachine. And I introduced our recruitment team up top, and the accelerated hiring, which is one of the chief's priority, it's a very difficult process. Like the chief said, we don't water down our process, but the people that I introduce, the officers, as well as the civilian member, Malva Henry, do a lot of work. They've been inundated with work from setting up our mass PBQs, doing our interviews, and like the chief said, they are responsible for hiring the future, but I can assure you, Mr. Chair, that they're hiring the best quality candidates for our service. And I said this before at the board, hashtag make Ottawa your best decision, thanks to Maria Keene. We have people that want to come to Ottawa. We are the employer of choice, so thank you for those people that attended from the recruiting section, and thank you for presenting.
Final comment, it's not a spike to football, but I think we can all take credit for the advancement of this particular critical portion of our human resource chain. That said, the EDI action plan, which was presented to the board at the last meeting, hopefully will have full approval. After the establishment of the EDI unit itself, the first action item and the most important action item is for the EDI unit to go back through and retest everything that you just heard here to make sure we get to the next level and the next level. We're not going to take any satisfaction with how far we've come. I want you to build confidence in you and the members of the public and the service in how far we've come. But we're not taking satisfaction. We're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And so I suspect we'll be back here again in relatively short order telling you about even more advancements and improvements on quality, quantity, and diversity within the process that we've just outlined here today. And I'll just echo the superintendent's comments, grateful for the efforts of everybody involved directly in this, and turn things over to you, Chair, for any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Superintendent, and thank you to the team for that presentation. I think when we accepted the accelerated hiring, which, as you mentioned, was historic, this is where the rubber hits the road, and we appreciate as a board how this is where the real work begins and how important this stage is, and I really appreciate all of the comments and work that you put into this. So I'll turn it over to my fellow board members for questions. Member Nerman.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to you all for a wonderful presentation. I see the EDI plan is coming into action. I have a few small clarifications, and if you can enlighten me with that. On page 9, you commented about the background investigators. Can you please advise me, in that background group of the background investigators, how many are the females, racialized females, and visible minorities into that group?
Currently, we have 24 background investigators, of which 4 are female. There are no racialized members. That being said, we have recently concluded a hiring process for an additional 12 background investigators. And pending successful completion of a background check for the new members, we'll hire an additional 3 women and 2 racialized males as part of the new background investigator team.
If you go on page 8, in 2019 graduating class, you said you have 66 new recruits, 39 males and 27 females. Can you please advise how many racialized females and visible minorities?
Actually, I don't have those statistics right now. I'll see if the superintendent does.
I don't have that stats in front of me, Mr. Chair, but I will be able to provide those afterwards.
Yeah, that's fine. Just a final comment to the chief. Chief, in the process of the OPS hiring, I have seen, I've learned there are various steps from the time the applicant decides to put in the application to the hiring. Can you please ensure that all the steps, including the background and everything, is fully transparent, and the people especially who do not have any connections with the police or who do not know what the police is, they have full faith into this process?
We will do our very best, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that sufficient, Member Nerman?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have to commend you. I think the process is wonderfully streamlined, very detailed. Of the 700 applications so that you received since January, I mean, I know that we are trying to get as many through. How many failed to get through there, like of the applicants through the stages that we've now set up? Does it weed out people we really don't want to see as well, I guess?
It definitely does. We have a multi-stage screening out process. So from the applicants, we look at somebody that they have to meet the essential competencies of a police officer, as well as the requisite education levels and moral characteristics that we seek of police officers. So every single, the ones that are deemed competitive get invited to the pre-background questionnaire. We just finished a mass pre-background questionnaire for about 100 people, and with every successive step, people are just being constantly measured, evaluated, and screened through a set of defined criteria of what takes to be a competitive applicant and whom do we want to proceed. And this is exciting for us because we've increased our number of applicants multifold. And this is not just a lot of applicants, but now we're seeing applicants that normally would have gone to the Federal Public Service, to the RCMP, to the OPP, because they had faster processes with no costs.
Okay. Have you learned anything so far, things that you would change?
Things that would change, would have instituted it earlier if we could have. We're getting... One of the parameters of our success is that when the RCMP called us a couple of months ago, and they invited me to have a discussion to attend to the headquarters to see how we've been able to have this marked increase. So when one of our competitors is calling us to find out how we're doing things and they're being so successful, I look at that as a measure of our success.
I guess just to sort of complete the circle on the first question, how many have failed of the 700 you've had to screen out?
Right now, we don't have those numbers because we're just in the process of initially, it does take 2 to 4 months from the date of application until somebody is being screened out. At the same time, we're now adopting a new software program, and some of those rejections have not gone out yet. But numbers being said, by the end of the process, from when recruits apply to the end, over 80% or more are screened out through each and every successive stage. So we can anticipate well in excess of 1,000 applicants, of which you'll only hire 153. Even by that rate, we'll be eliminating the vast majority, over 85%.
Remember me, and maybe this is helpful, by the end of the year, and I just had a quick chat with the CAO, we should be able to give you a full breakdown of where we're seeing people progress through, and ideally, again, it's not an exact science, but as far as people self-identify, we can see where we're losing candidates who are quality and potentially diversity, and we'll make fine-tune adjustments around that. Right now, as the acting inspector has said, it's too early to actually know how many of those 700 people, because they're not all the way through the process just yet.
But it's doing that, and I think that's really what I was getting at, that in our zeal, or in our quest to hire, we're weeding out the people who shouldn't be, and we are getting the best. So I'm confident of hiring Frankie, and you know what? I've known him forever. I don't know his last name. He's my son's friend. He'll make an excellent police officer. I'm serious, and I not say that because I know him, but he's a good kid. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Member Nerman. Member Meehan, Member Valiquet.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I have a few questions that have to do with, one with backgrounders and also with new recruits. Maybe we'll start with the recruits. How do you decide who's going to get mentored?
We offer mentorship to everyone. So we offer it at the beginning. We encourage people to reach out to us, and we certainly mentor anybody that takes us up on our offer. We don't exclude anybody from the mentorship program.
And when does that start? Does it start at the first public, sort of at the information session? How do you get a sense of who is somebody who's potential for you?
We get, and I can also let Sergeant Keene respond to this shortly, but it starts from the onset, right from our literature, right from our earliest contacts with any members of the public where we offer it, and then the people that are interested are then forwarded to Sergeant Keene for the mentorship. Maria?
As the acting inspector said, it's through our travels at events, reaching out, doing outreach, speaking to people that have never really considered policing as a career. We have people in our mentorship program that have been with us for 1.5 years. As you see, Saeed, he was in our mentor program. Really, it's for anybody. We encourage them first to obviously come to our info session and look at our website. It's pretty detailed. But once they've exasperated that and they still want it, that one-on-one, we obviously welcome that. It's a little bit crazy right now, but
yes, I can imagine 700 applicants. That's mind-boggling. So, say you have this number of 700. And they're interested in becoming a police officer. To get through all of the different steps, can that be something that they do, like what's the shortest period of time that you can spend going through the full cycle, and what would be the longest?
Right now, the shortest would be approximately 2 months, but that's pending that they're able to meet everything on a very accelerated time frame. And the longest that we're aiming for is between 4 to 6 months, but no longer. And this one, in order for us to, just to be able to assess all of our applicants on a timely basis and compare them with everyone else, but also to be fair to the person too. We certainly don't want to go back to the past where applicants had sat in or they saw these extensive delays in the recruitment process.
And what's the minimum education required to apply?
Currently, as per the Police Services Act, the minimum is a high school education. With the changes coming in 2021 to the Police Services Act, the minimum requirement will be a college diploma or university degree from an accredited Canadian school or having that equivalency provided.
And why do you feel that's important?
As the change, these are just strictly my own personal views. As the changes to policing are becoming more complex, we've seen the increased needs on police officers. And with that, a person's education at times is correlated to the person's capability. and their dedication to bettering themselves. We have seen now increased demands on police officers throughout, and by valuing education and making that one of the cornerstones of our career, not just at the onset, but lifelong learning, we're able to increase the quality of officers that we're putting out there on the streets.
Are you getting any applicants that are older, more mature people, or are they mostly young people?
We certainly are. Of the class that's coming right now for hire, by older applicants in the 40s, as well as applicants from the 20s all the way to the 40s, we've selected for this upcoming class.
And maybe perhaps for the benefit of the room, can you tell us what putting the program through an EDI lens means? I'm not sure everybody understands really what EDI means and using the lens. Can you explain that further, what EDI lens means?
Sorry, just need some clarification what the EDI lens means for us as a recruitment section. The EDI lens for us is to ensure that we have at the onset a barrier-free process, that we make ourselves the employer of choice for all members of our community, regardless of their demographics, regardless of their gender, regardless of their orientation. We seek to ensure that applicants from our entire community are welcomed to, they're supported, and that ultimately our hiring makeup for our classes are reflective of our community. So through that, and every single step along the way, and following their hiring, it's not just the hiring, but also the retention piece and the training piece, to which Inspector Lachine spoke earlier. We're doing the most to support the people that we've hired, because we certainly don't want to welcome them in only for them to leave within a short order of time with a negative experience.
Okay, and I have one last question. Back to the backgrounders. I'm wondering if, there is a myth out there that backgrounders have the final say and can influence who gets hired or not. And you've been very good in describing and telling us how they don't have the final word. But I'm just wondering if you decide do you match up a backgrounder with who you think they would be best able to decide whether or not this person could become a potential police officer?
Generally, no, we don't come to the background and say, because that exercise would be saying that, well, this person would be good for this type. We trust all of our background investigators to be equally professional. And whether they're man or woman, whether they'll be our new racialized background investigators, we trust them to be able to conduct full, fair, and frank reports and investigations for us.
And who supervises the backgrounders?
They're supervised by the sergeants directly, as well as by the staff sergeant, and ultimately the inspector who reads all the reports. So if and when issues should arise, the chain of command will address that with the background investigator. This is similar to any other employee of the Ottawa Police Service.
Okay.
They're held to the same set of standards. Their performance is tracked through the same talent management system, and ultimately, should they falter, they'll be held to the same level of account.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Sorry, Chair, do you mind if I just some
Yes.
additional color commentary? Excellent set of questions, I appreciate it. I just want to recognize that while there's an ongoing effort within policing to assess the standards for policing and, quite frankly, to continue to improve them and make them more and more challenging for the next generation of police officers to aspire to and achieve. This police service is built on a majority of police officers who came through back 30 years ago. Most of them had grade 12 education, and most of them did not truly represent the broader demographics, but nonetheless provided an invaluable service to this city and has placed it in one of the best positions anywhere in the world, and I'm extremely proud of everyone. The ones who've been most successful are the ones who've come in with the biggest head and the biggest heart and what connects in between. So they've committed themselves to ongoing learning, even if their highest level of education attainment was grade 12. And they've committed themselves to building an inclusive environment, even though we're not where we want to be. And so I'm grateful for that tradition of leadership and excellence in the organization. As much as we are confident that we have an effective and equitable background check I mentioned before, we're going to put it through the EDI action plan. It'll be the first most important place we turn that unit towards to make sure that if there's anything else we can do to improve it, and I'm sure there is, that we will do those improvements and report back to the board in due course.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the efforts that are being made. Right now, there's about 1,300 police officers in the force, and you're bringing in 100, which is a pretty good proportion. I'm wondering about what efforts are being made in terms of sensitization and training for the current officers and in terms of integrating these new recruits in.
I'll turn that over to Heather Sheen.
So are you speaking about the coach officers or the entire organization? I'm sorry, just to clarify.
The entire organization, I mean, because you're bringing in, they're going to be working with everybody, and what kind of sensitivity training or equity training is done with those that are presently officers?
Well, currently, we have done a number of that training through the years, and this year we are doing for all of our officers the Towards Authentic Inclusion course. So we ran it initially through the supervisors of the organization, and by the end of the year, every single member of the organization, civilian and sworn, will have received that training. And it's also training that is given to, as Inspector Mbikulo said, to the backgrounders as well.
So that's like a classroom training?
Correct. It's a classroom training. It's members of our organization have done a train the trainer with Global Affairs Canada, and they come in and come together, and it's various scenarios that they go through, and actually the scenarios that they're using are scenarios that are based from our own neighborhoods within the city of Ottawa, so it is specific to our own city.
Okay, thank you. So it's dealing with the public, that's the implication, but it's also dealing with their own cohorts.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, just so you know, I'll be going for my full day of training for Towards Authentic Inclusion this Friday.
And
my
I think some of the
schedule is blocked off to make sure that I'm there for every minute of it, and I'm looking forward to it.
And I think some of the members of the board are as well, Chief.
Outstanding, good. Can I also point out, because if training was the solution for all the problems that ail humanity, we would have solved all the problems of humanity a long time ago. I have David Snoddy in the back, and I have Deb Arnaud. If you guys could just raise your hands. More importantly, quite frankly, than any bucket of training we can pour on top of human beings is creating systems and capacity within an organization of this size and complexity to make sure that we address respect in the workplace, the truest sense of diversity, equity, inclusion, and we're blessed in the Ottawa Police Service to have two of the most expert and experienced leaders in the business providing advice to our next generation of leaders like Heather Lachine about how to construct not just a training requiem, but an entire development program from cradle to grave.
I appreciate that. Just one final question. In terms of if somebody feels uncomfortable, if somebody wants to report an issue, who do they go to in terms of like new recruits not feeling comfortable?
I think you've heard about the coach officer piece, but there may be more that the inspector wants to add to that. Any member and any supervisor is not just responsible to receive that concern, but to report that into the organization. Again, we are lucky to have one of the best respectful workplace units in the entire police service. We're going to be making further investments into that. But encouraging people to come forward if there is an issue in a proactive way is one of the important pieces. I think, Inspector, you'd gone through that with the coach officers again, but maybe just more specifically for the council.
Correct. So as I stated earlier, when the recruits begin, they develop strong relationships initially with the outreach recruitment team, who they use as a resource from the very beginning. And I know in speaking to the team, this continues on even when they become members of the organization. Further to that, through the training at the Professional Development Center, they're advised of the supports that are available to them. Also, we have employee resource groups that we have in the organization, and they are becoming directly involved as well to come and speak to our recruits to make sure that they're aware that this is another resource. We have currently employee resource group for racialized members, employee resource group for LGBTQ, and for women. And so the recruits, there's an education piece on that as another resource for them to reach out to, including their chain of command and including the professional development center that's available to them at all times.
So there's a complaint mechanism in place if they have a concern?
In that circumstance, if they come to any of these members and there is a complaint, then if we do not deal with it ourselves, we will direct them to the correct mechanism, the correct people, be it our respectful workplace advisor, be it the professional standards section. We have an accountability to do that, so yes.
Okay, and they're given that information?
Correct,
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And it's not that I'm picking on police, because this is something that every workforce has to have, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I think, Chief, you can see this is a very important issue for the board, and we're all looking forward to seeing the fruits of this, your efforts here. On this presentation, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this presentation for information? Yes. It's received. Thank you very much. The next item that was held was the internal board communications protocol. Member Nerman, you had a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. And this is just my suggestion. And while I reiterate full faith and confidence in our executive director and yourself, and it is my belief that the entire document about the internal communication is a great initiative and well documented. But before that, let me apologize. I messed up and I raised this issue earlier while it should have been now, and I apologize. It is my considered view that a minor variance to the point 6 of the document be done. I would suggest that the board should consult expert in the corporate governance matter for the police boards and shall draw the parameters about the issues, especially the critical and non-routine communications, and then such matters upon the advice and the consent of the board be embedded in this policy document.
Deputy Chief Bell, can you comment, please?
So if I'm going to actually ask you, Member Nerman, to reframe if you can ask the question again. I thought the question was specifically around how the board would deconflict one of their internal issues. So if you could repeat it again, just so that I have the nuance of the question.
So you want to raise my concern once again? Okay, my suggestion is in terms of this point number 6, which is internal board communications, and using the discretionary information which flows down from the chair and the executive director to the board members. We should be consulting, the board should be consulting expert in the corporate governance matters for the police boards, and there should be certain parameters of such communications, and that should be embedded in the policy, especially when the information flows in. There are non-routine communications or critical communications for which the absolute discretionary should be cautious, not absolutely.
Maybe Member Valaket wants to address that.
Thank you. I'm rereading point number 6, and it says, as the initial point of contact for information coming to the board, the chair and ED will exercise their discretion in how information is best brought forward to the board. For example, email, committee, board meetings, etc. Should the chair and the ED have irreconcilable differences on the handling of a matter, the vice chair will be consulted. It is also acknowledged that routine matters can escalate over time and necessitates changes in how the board is notified and/or how information on that matter is shared. So to me, reading it again, this point is quite clear, but I think maybe in order to better understand your concern, can you provide us with an example? Maybe give us an example of something where you see that this would be problematic, and then that we can resolve by discussing.
Yes, I can.
Maybe I can suggest, because I don't think we want to rewrite this document here. If you have concerns, you actually were part of that committee. So if you have concerns, I suggest you take your suggestion back to the committee and then come forward with something you agree to. Okay?
I'm okay.
Thank you. So then on that item, internal board communication protocol, that the Ottawa Police Service Board approve the internal board. Actually, in this case, we won't. What we'll do is we'll table it until you come forward with the new one. That's acceptable? Okay. The next item we had on hold was item 7, Positive Workplace 2019 Annual Report. Member Valakay, you had a question on this.
Thank you. My questions are, my questions are, how do you measure that the program was well received by the membership?
There were a number of surveys that were conducted, so there's that qualitative piece. Another way of measuring is whether or not we're still seeing members coming forward with concerns and complaints. And while we've seen a relatively steady approach there, an increase in some cases can be an indication of a positive, that people are more confident to come forward. I mean, you've heard about an extensive effort that we'll be doing on behalf of the coach officer program to make sure that concerns are brought forward more frequently and more clearly in a way that we can address them more proactively. I will tell you that this is an area that is under substantive review by myself and the new command team about how we can build out our capabilities around not just professional standards, respect in the workplace, but integrating that across all the different channels. So we have concerns that come up through the performance channel, through the health and wellness channel, through the labor channel, yes, through professional standards and respect in the workplace. And sometimes they're not as fully connected as they need to be. So this is an area that we're going to put more investment in the short term.
And do you have a timeline set for when a complaint first comes in and how long it takes to get it resolved?
Certain legislation will guide that. So under the OIPRD and SIU legislation, yes. Internally, there are less rigorous benchmarks. We just had a substantive meeting today. Our Chief Counsel, Christiane Huneau, is actually going to be producing an interim strategy around how we connect all these different areas, and that will be part of a longer-term review that we do before the end of the year.
Member Meehan.
I read this report with great interest. The thing that caught my eye and just worried me a little bit was that near the end in the conclusions, it seemed to be contradictory in the conclusions. It says the OPS is committed to a respectful workplace, and there's excellent examples of tools that we're ensuring all members can feel their concerns can be heard and addressed. And we're talking about equity and diversity training and getting along in the workplace, and yet the volume of files being handled continues to be significant and growing. And it seems to me, on one hand, like we're doing a lot of things right, yet the cases are growing. Is it just is it a matter of, I mean, are the cases actually growing, or are people more confident to bring those cases forward? I'm just trying to reconcile what we're saying here.
Well, the challenge is there are still issues coming within the organization. The success, I believe, is actually that we're seeing an increase in reporting. There are more avenues in which to report. People have more confidence in which to report. The issues that we are confronted, particularly around respect in the workplace, are being more broadly understood in society, and education is happening on a much broader scale. And so, yes, we are seeing an uptake in systems that before people didn't have the confidence or even the knowledge. Again, I don't want to say we're a victim of our own success. We're actually making progress by our own success. The board should not be surprised that we see an increase in reporting over the next several years as we increase the ability and confidence of our members to come forward and report. What we should see is a leveling off of that at some point. In the same way, when we put neighborhood teams into communities that have, for any combination of reasons, disengaged from policing, and all of a sudden we see an increase in reporting of behind-door offenses, domestic assault, sexual assault. Again, this is an indication of growing confidence in the system to come forward, not an indication of a broken system.
Should be concerned with the red file, like 32 are in the red file right now, and red means potential for organizational and strategic consequences and or harm, mental or physical, to a person. What should we understand about that?
I'm going to have my superintendent answer the question, but I'll come back around to give my own comments after.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing that we look at the files, that they're not all necessarily complaints. There are also many proactive files. So a member may come through, or a supervisor might come to our executive advisor or her ethics team, and also, for example, a red file, yes, the risk is very high, but they're intervening in a proactive way from a perspective of how do we best proceed. And perhaps in our reporting, we can better, in the future, divvy those up from a perspective of what is actually an advice file. It might take a lot of work as well, but where it's a proactive endeavor on behalf of a supervisor or someone coming to our office to say, here's an issue that we have, how best to proceed, as opposed to a complaint. And that way you'll be able to better see how the office is being used on a positive way, from a proactive way from our members, using it to get advice on how to proceed with an issue, be it employee or be it from their work, day-to-day work on the street, like ethics. When you talk about the ethics files, which I think you're referring to, as you can imagine, a lot of our world is very much in the gray. So sometimes they'll approach the office and give them examples or things that they're facing and garner advice on how to best proceed. So there is a, although obviously you have a high 32 red files, it sounds like it's, but those are not necessarily all complaints against the organization. They're also proactively moving forward to get answers, if that makes sense.
Sort of. But thank you. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. That the item number 7 on this report, that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Received? Thank you. So now, is there any other business? And there being no other business, in consideration of motion to move in camera, that the Ottawa Police Services Board adjourn the public portion of its meeting to move in camera to discuss confidential items pertaining to legal and personnel matters in accordance with Section 35(4)B of the Police Services Act. Do you have a mover and a shaker?